It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who believes a can of Pringles counts as a meal, Bill Chase! Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome everybody to another edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan. I am Bill Chase, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasts are streamed. Hit that follow button, the subscribe button, whatever platform you have, just hit the button that allows you to follow this podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. And today we're going back to one of the hottest eras in professional wrestling, 1998, September 98 to be exact. But first, before we get to the podcast, first I want to give a quick shout out to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you listen to this podcast on YouTube, scroll over the top of the video on your right, and there you'll see the link. Hit that subscribe button once you're done listening to the podcast and check out some action from Pro Wrestling Ontario. We got matches, we got promos, we got the backstage shenanigans of Foundation, we even got complete shows. Check it out. That's Pro Wrestling Ontario. On today's podcast, we have WCW. Nah, just kidding. It's WCW NWO Fall Brawl 1998. People seem to like the WCW episodes, even though they're not quite as successful as the WWF ones. And again, that's not me being snarky. To be perfectly honest with you, most of the WWF ones have done a ton better than the WCW or even the ECW one I did. So I don't know. I guess more people just want to hear WWF stuff. I guess that's just how she be. But either way, I'll still continue to do WCW stuff. There are some topics I think that I like to address. WCW was a big part of my wrestling fandom, especially around this time. So I'd feel pretty stupid not covering that promotion at all. But here we go. WCW Fall Brawl, WCW NWO, Fall Brawl 1998. Now, right now during the Monday Night Wars, the WWF was still doing really well, drawing big audiences, but WCW had actually won quite a few battles in the summertime. One of note, of course, is where things begin here. The Return of the Warrior. Boy, is he ultimate. I'm sorry, that just reminds me of the time on commentary when Ray Traylor came in as the boss at WCW back in 93 or 94. And the boss, and I think Tony once said, man, is he ever big? And boy, is he a man. It's kind of ridiculous, but no. Warrior, and you know who I'm referring to, had not been seen in wrestling publicly on a national basis for over 2 years. He made his last appearance on WWF Monday Night Raw back in July of 96, and he was subsequently let go due to no showing many events, and of course another dispute with Vince McMahon. That run barely lasted 3 months, and he was out the door by then. But his name still had value, obviously. I mean, his return was, the rumors leaked out on the internet from what I understand, and I remember his return. Okay, because here's the thing. It's August of 98. WWF was still hot, even though Nitro was doing really good in the ratings still, and we even winning some battles here, even leading into SummerSlam, which many thought, some people actually thought that was going to be trouble for the WWF. Meanwhile, SummerSlam drew the largest non-WrestleMania buy rate at that time. And I remember right away, I wasn't watching Nitro that day, but I was at home. I was outside with a couple of my friends, and my mom came outside and said I had a phone call, and it was John, my good friend John Vorjak. And he told me, Warriors on Nitro, Warriors on Nitro. I'm like, Ultimate Warriors? Like, do you know any other kind? So I turned the channel, and there he is. And he must have called me right away because Warrior was still coming down the aisle, entering the ring. Hogan's face, actually, Hogan's selling of that entrance was fantastic. I got to give him credit there. He really sold the fact that he was terrified. And he thought he'd seen a ghost. Then Warrior started talking. And talking some more. And kept on going. And like I said, I was not what people categorize, say, as a smart fan that way. Well, even I was bored by this. I'm like, okay, let's get to the point. And then even I realized this at the time. Here I am, a young teenage fan, when Warrior said beating Hogan was no big deal. I'm thinking in my head, yes, it is. I've been watching Hulk Hogan my entire wrestling fandom, and beating him is a big deal. You can count in less than 30 seconds people who have beaten Hogan. And when I should specify this, since Hogan did have a career long before he hit it huge. I mean, like, even if you go back, you can go as far back as his AWA run. The list of people who beat him, I'm talking pin, submission, it's not very long. I mean, he's suffered a lot. Like, people forget, Hogan did suffer a lot of like DQ and count out losses, but never really that many pinfall or submission losses. At this point, the only ones I can really remember offhand are Warrior, The Undertaker, Yokozuna, Lex Luger. Yeah, I think I probably might be missing one or two. But no, I can't think of any more. So already, my excitement that was sky high the moment John told me what was happening, I literally forgot about it by the end of the day. To the point where I'm hanging out with my cousins that weekend. This was just about a week maybe or so before SummerSlam. And I think, yeah, it was and that's right. They came over to watch a Cat game. Cats were riding like a 6-game winning streak, and then we just got throttled by the Argos. But then can't remember which one it was. I remember one of my cousins asked me, "Hey, did you see Warrior was on WCW?" And for a second, I'm like, "Huh? Oh yeah, yeah." Like, be that as it may, I was still interested to see what a rematch between these two would be. But at the same time, though, I wasn't watching Nitro every week at this point. The Jay Leno stuff was mildly amusing for what it was. Good match for a photo op, drew a big number for WCW, so they did something right there, but I don't know. I think I was just getting annoyed with all like the celebrities, and the stuff they were doing with Scott Hall at this time was terrible. Being portrayed as a drunk on television, which and this is another thing too that I got into a recent dispute with somebody on Facebook about the whole recent Jeff Hardy and Sheamus angle, where he tried to argue, well, I said to me, because I said it feels like this angle's been dealt from the bottom of the deck. And he said, well, hey, the best angles are, derived from real life, and people want the Attitude Era back. I'm like, yeah, I don't recall drunk Scott Hall, or as they call it, last call Scott Hall, or freaking drunk Road Warrior Hawk, which is happening in WWF at exactly this time as well. Nobody's really crying for that to come back. So there goes that logic, or lack thereof. So, really, I was still captivated by SummerSlam at this time. Now, I'll do a whole separate podcast one day on SummerSlam 98, but it was an epic show. And to top it off, at this time, the WWF is preparing for a pay-per-view in my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario. Spoiler, I'll be doing that podcast next week. At the time, my parents still allowed me, I guess, to watch wrestling, but they tried to limit my wrestling viewing. And here's why. Back in the spring, I forged a report card. No, I'm not talking about a signature. I mean, I did that too. But, I forged an entire report card. Kind of like what Bart tried to do on The Simpsons, only not as comedic, and I got punished severely for it. And rightfully so. I was a dumbass for doing it. So, they tried to limit my wrestling watching. I got a lot of things taken away from me. By the summer, though, most of the stuff I had taken away was given back because I still managed to finish the year and still pass classes in summer school. So it wasn't that bad. Like, it could have been much worse. And another thing, too, is that my parents, despite the punishment, they were more than fair. They still try to limit my wrestling watching, but I can admit this now. Mom, I know my mom, there's a possibility my mom might be listening. Mom, I was watching all the time, so pretty much. Sorry. I'm sure she knows that by now. Probably not even telling her anything she doesn't already know, but yeah. So anyway, but the point is, I still try not to push my luck. And I mentioned this on other podcasts in different times where I didn't like to press my parents to order every single pay-per-view. I didn't like to press them for tickets every time WWF came to town. I didn't like to do that sort of thing. I would drop subtle hints. Sometimes they would take the hint. Sometimes they knew what I was saying, but they just wouldn't cave in. So this time I didn't. I mentioned maybe once. They had to know. It was in the local newspapers. It was on our local television. So they had to know. And I remember I was jealous because John, as well as my friend Adam Pryor, they had tickets to the show as well. And I was really I wanted to go. But, so whatever, I guess I'll be watching from the comfort of my own home. So as August ended, as we all enjoyed SummerSlam, I had a big pay-per-view party for that, involving my cousins as well as John. I also I'm still watching WCW pay-per-views monthly, pretty much. There's the odd one I missed here and there, but not too often still, even when I wasn't watching Nitro all that much. So the thing is, I actually forgot Fall Brawl was coming up until I saw a commercial for it. It was Labor Day weekend before I'm going into grade 10. And I was watching the Labor Day Classic football game between the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Toronto Argonauts. Again, the Argos, as I mentioned, had throttled us a couple weeks prior. We barely scraped by BC, so Tigers weren't playing all that well the last couple weeks, despite the fact that we were 7-2, first place in the East, and we're having our best year probably since 1989. So we go to the game, and we freaking wipe the floor with the Argos. I usually, at this point, I used to go to games with my grandmother. We had season tickets, but the thing is, she had to cut back on certain costs, so she didn't get season tickets anymore. She didn't go to every game. She would go to the odd one here and there, but usually I would now start going with my cousins, my uncles, my dad, to games. But the deal was, and my grandmother even said this, Labor Day is our game. Yes, so I went with my grandmother to this, even though my cousins were there. I remember I slept over the night before. Actually, sorry, I'm all over the place here, but I slept over the night before, and there was a huge thunderstorm in the morning. This huge clap of thunder, because we're all sleeping in the living room. Huge clap of thunder. Every single one of us wakes right up. It was around 9:30 anyway. So we all just wake up. Did you hear that? And literally 5 minutes later, the sun's out. Despite this huge storm, despite the fact that, because I was kind of awake on and off a little bit before that big clap of thunder. Thinking, great, it's going to be raining at the game. But no, it was boiling hot. I think it was up to 29 degrees, 29, 30 degrees. I'm wearing a black Ticat jersey. Shows my support for my team. But I remember before the game, as we're walking there, because I even though I walked there with my cousins, I was meeting up with my grandmother, and who was it? It was I think my cousin Mike. He asked me, he's like, "You don't watch much WCW anymore, do you?" I'm like, "I do." I said, I think WWF's better right now, and a lot of WCW stuff they're doing, I'm just not really enjoying. Not even the Warrior? Yeah, kinda. And he asked me, he's like, "Well, what do you enjoy about WCW?" I'm like, "Well, a Goldberg. Jericho's pretty funny, even though I hated him." And no, it's not I hated him because, he's a crappy wrestler like these fans online these days. No, I hated him because he was a heel, and a really good one. But I also was entertained by his antics, too. The whole conspiracy victim thing was hysterical. So other than that, I said I like the whole Raven Saturn thing because I was a big Raven fan, as I mentioned in my ECW podcast. We checked it out in the archives. Huge Raven fan, and you know what? I was actually enjoying the stuff with him and Saturn. Really invested in that story with Saturn, fighting the flock and fighting for the flock to be free from Raven's grasp. I thought that was a great story, but other than that, I just didn't really care all that much. Goldberg wasn't really, Goldberg pretty much just dominated the whole roster, all the top guys, in like a battle royal type match at Road Wild. So like, now what? Yeah, even I thought that, like, well, now who's he gonna beat? He's beating the Giant. Maybe Brett. I was thinking Goldberg Brett. So yeah, there was that. But no, I wasn't overly excited. I'm always happy to watch a pay per view, and I'm always excited to watch a pay per view. But it wasn't that thrill that I had even just a year prior. You know what I mean? To watch Fall Brawl, and so the day came. My parents, they did what they usually do. They went to a movie while I watched the pay per view in the basement, rec room. Well, the rec room was in the basement. And yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, this will be fun. War games. I love war. That's the thing. I love war games. That's why I was looking forward to this. War games was 3 teams: Team WCW, Team NWO, and Team NWO Wolfpack. Now, right, I was keeping up with some of what was going on, but I hadn't watched a single Nitro since the Warrior episode. I knew there was problems with Bret and the NWO. Bret Hart was part of the NWO at this point, which I thought was ridiculous. Well, no, he was an associate. I can never make that. God. So I remember it's pretty sad. I remember this. I had a bag of Lay's barbecue. Mind you, that usually was my go-to snack for a pay-per-view. It was Lay's barbecue, and I think my mom left me. My mom makes the best macaroni salad. Hold on, I'm gonna let my cat out. Sorry, my cat was in the room here with me. So I made this macaroni. My mom made this macaroni salad. I made macaroni salad. Yeah, right. Like I said, she makes the best macaroni salad. So then, before the show started, I'm eating it during the countdown show, and I'm watching the countdown hype for this. I'm thinking, I don't know, is this going to be really that great a show? I honestly was thinking that. I'm like, well, it might be. I don't know. I think my parents actually went to see Blade that night because I went to see that movie shortly after this. So yeah, my parents were seeing Blade, probably having a better time than I was about to have. Again, I'm not the type of fan who likes to shit on WCW all the time. They had a lot of great stuff. And there's even some of it here. Okay. So the show begins, and the one thing I didn't know is that the one who scores the winning pinfall in the War Games match gets shot at the WCW Championship against Goldberg at Halloween Havoc. Now, Goldberg wasn't even booked to be on this show. I'm sorry, call me old-fashioned, call me crazy, but if you're doing a pay-per-view and your champion is able-bodied, he should be on the fucking pay-per-view. I'm sorry, but I said this with Hogan. I say it now with Goldberg. I'm not saying it's their, well, it might be Hogan's fault, but I'm not saying it's necessarily, their fault. I wasn't there. I'm not behind the scenes, but knowing what I hear about Hogan from people who that were worked with him, that's probably true. That is probably in his contract. He didn't have to work certain pay-per-views. He's, you know what I mean? Whereas I just don't get the logic of the champion not being on a pay-per-view. I don't. Even if it's not a title match, he should still be there. But that's me. That's just me. So there's a video package, yeah, talking about the War Games match. Tony Schiavone, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Mike Tenay are the hosts, and they're talking, and I remember the big "We Want Flair" chant started, and now this is what I have to go on. We want Flair. Like, and again, Flair had not been on television since spring. So almost 6 months at this point. Almost half a year at least. And this was one of his biggest markets. I mean, we're in the Carolinas here. And many, smart fans had felt that they killed this town after Winston-Salem, that is, specifying here, that with the whole ending of the War Games the year prior with Kurt Hennig's heel turn after his dramatic joining of the Horsemen, where Arn Anderson literally gives him his spot, which was a great moment in the history of Monday Nitro. And Hennig turned and joined the NWO. Maybe people thought that killed the town, but there's still a good crowd here. Obviously, they're very ruckus, even though Flair is not on this show, but more on that later. So, before any match starts, we go backstage, and Ernest the Cat Miller is being held back by security. That was the segment. I didn't get it either. Whatever. Okay, so Mean Gene comes to the stage, hypes up the card, and Chris Jericho comes out. Jericho this time was a TV champion, and oh my goodness, the Boo Birds were out for him. Boo! Like massive boos here. And again, this is a guy who right now, as I'm recording this podcast, is a top heel, one of the top guys in AEW at the age of 50. He's pushing 50. Here he was about almost 28. Jericho was an upper mid-carder. And again, folks, I'm going to reiterate to you, it's another term that's been used negatively these days. Mid-carder is not a bad thing. They serve a major purpose to the card. And Jericho was on the upper echelon of that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Meaning he still got a lot of TV time. He still had a lot of views that got a lot of attention. And of course, as his reaction here says, he had a lot of heat. He was doing the whole a paragon of virtue thing, styling his hair in ridiculous ways, referring to people as jerkaholics. All that stuff had kind of just started. Claiming he was a conspiracy victim. He had Jericho personal security, a bigger man by the name of Ralphus. And from what I understand, unfortunately, we had just learned this week, Ralphus sadly has passed away. Apparently he passed away a while ago, but only word about it just got around recently. His real name was John Riker, and he was part of the trucking crew for WCW, and Jericho decided to use him randomly. And even Ralphus got over. Ralphus he had like the really short, for Trailer Park Boy fans, think of Phil. Think of Philadelphia Collins and the gut. It wasn't quite as big as Phil's, but the type of shirt Ralphus was wearing almost made it look that way. Ralphus wore this really, low-cut shirt, saying Jericho personal security written in like marker. It was great stuff. Jericho's trying to be like Goldberg, having sparklers, doing the spectacular entrances, getting lost in the arena. It was just good stuff. So Jericho comes out, massive boos, so he's doing his job great here. And he actually says he's calling out Goldberg. Now, I'm thinking at the time, oh, okay, all right, buddy. You know what I thought right away? Goldberg's going to kick your ass. And you know what? I want to see it. I want to see Jericho get demolished by Goldberg. So right away, and again, Jericho has questioned how WCW handled this whole situation, and rightfully so. Because, spoiler, they handled it really badly. And also Goldberg's attitude didn't help either. Already. I'm just one fan, mind you, but I doubt I'm the only one that wanted to see Goldberg destroy this little puke. Like, good. Hope he destroys you. Calling out tonight. So, maybe Goldberg is here. Let the speculation begin. All right, so we finally get to the show here. First match is a team not officially called the Dancing Fools, but kind of referred to that way in passing. But that's Disco Inferno and Alex Wright. Das Wunderkind. And they take on the team of Jim the Anvil Neidhart and the British Bulldog. Now, me being a nostalgic, loving guy, even at the age of 15, remembering finally, all the guys I grew up watching, I'm going for the Anvil and the Bulldog here. But their run in WCW had not been overly memorable, and it was about to get a whole lot worse, especially for one of them. So during the match, I couldn't tell when at the time. I didn't find out until a couple months after this. Goldberg. Bulldog. Speaking about Goldberg, got Goldberg on the brain. He got slammed on a trapdoor. Spoiler! On a trapdoor, which later the Warrior would do a little stunt with. Yeah. And the crowd I noticed here was more on the side of Disco and Wright. Disco and Wright had become a very comedic tag team, and comedy at the time, if it's done right, it gets over. And Disco had a cult following already at this point, so it's not surprising that he was getting some cheers. Then I just think that the Bulldog and Anvil, again, their entire run had been forgettable at this point. They'd pretty much been guys used on WCW Saturday Night, getting enhancement victories, doing the odd job on Nitro or a pay-per-view. And just nothing was happening. As a matter of fact, I remember that somebody had told me at school, I can't remember, one of the wrestling fans that was one of the smart fans in school, said that they were referred to online as the old age in-laws, a little play on the current WWF tag team at the time, the New Age Outlaws, who were heavily popular. The old age in-laws. I actually thought that was funny. I thought it was pretty funny, though I like the guys. But either way, this match, it wasn't very good. Bulldog badly hit the power slam because obviously he was injured being slammed on that trapdoor. That was a time that would change the Bulldog's career and life as we know it. That moment, even though not knowing, watching at the time, changed everything for the poor guy. It's sad. It was sad what would follow in his life thereafter. The long-term suffering he went through because of this injury, which I'll probably go into more detail on a different podcast. But yeah, it was really bad for him. They won the match, and that was it. Bulldog was gone. And I wouldn't see him for another year when he popped up, surprisingly, in the WWF. I'll probably elaborate more on the Bulldog at around when I cover that era. So then there was another segment with Scott Steiner. He may not fight Brother Rick again tonight. And at this point, they've teased us now pay-per-view after pay-per-view. They broke up in February. This is September. I know it's good to tease a bill, but when you're doing the same goddamn thing over and over, I was so annoyed. As soon as I saw this, I'm thinking in my head, you gotta be kidding me. They're still doing this? I even said, I remember, I'm watching the TV at the time. I roll my eyes and say, just fight already. So thankfully, I was relieved to see J.J. Dillon come out, tearing up the doctor's note that Scott and Buff Bagwell, and that whole thing was another debacle. He rips it up and says he will be banned for life if he doesn't win the match. If Scott doesn't win the match. I'm like, finally, it's gonna happen. It's finally gonna happen. Oh, God. Anyway. So Jericho, about to make his entrance. As Ralphus and the Jerichoholic Ninja, yes. Escort him to ringside. They end up doing the whole thing where they wander around the whole building. Jericho shouts, "Where's the ring?" He would do this almost every week. I don't know at this point. I remember Tony Schiavone just saying how sad and pathetic this was. And I'm laughing my ass off. I'm like, you're freaking dope. And the parody of Goldberg's entrance, where there's no pyro, it's just a few sparklers. Jericho gets pissed off that he's disrespected. So Goldberg's music hits, the crowd goes nuts, and it's not Goldberg. It's a guy who makes Gilbert look like Goldberg. I'm not kidding. This guy was tiny. So Jericho pulls off I'm at the time I'm just shaking my hand like you freaking puke. But I'm also kind of laughing too, and Jericho's doing that, come on, baby. As the crowd started chanting bullshit. And I'm pretty sure because this guy's carrying like one of those toy foam belts, and Jericho destroys it. People kind of crafted this on the time because it's not. They said it would have been fine for a Nitro, but to put it on a pay-per-view, I don't know. In hindsight, I don't think it matters in the grand scheme of things. I still thought it was, in hindsight, it's funny. And to me, I think it set up people wanting to see Jericho get speared right out of his boots, which I believe was an idea he had. Sadly, they would build this up for a few more weeks. Jericho saying, "Oh, it's me 2 or 3, Goldberg nothing," and sadly, that's about as far as it went. Goldberg speared him in the alleyway. There was no payoff match because Jericho apparently was not on Goldberg's level. That's the long story short on that one. Yeah, that's ridiculous. I didn't find it out until years later, obviously. So Rick Steiner's at the internet position, and the king of the internet, mustache Lee Marshall, was interviewing him about Scott. And yeah, he says he knows his brother's weaknesses, stuff like that. Mike Tenay, I remember there was the whole thing with was it? Oh yeah, the cat. Sorry, so the cat was wondering, Ernest the Cat Miller was wondering, where's all the TV time for the 3-time karate champ? And he beats up the Armstrong brothers, which was their job, get beat up. And he's, I think Norman Smiley broke it out. That's right. So that would set up their match. Norman Smiley versus Ernest the Cat Miller. Miller was entertaining. He was really starting to find his groove at this point, but I still did not give 2 shits. He would progress even more through 99 in terms of entertainment value. The guy had a lot of charisma. Tons. And Norman Smiley, I would actually grow to like Norman Smiley quite a bit not long after this. And again, I just remember really not caring at all. I think during this match, I went to get a pop from my fridge, and I just did not care. So and then around this time, John calls me. He says, "Hey, are you watching Fall Brawl?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Why? What's going on?" I guess John was bored. Sometimes he would call me when he was bored. And he says, "What's happening so far?" I'm like, "Well, Rick and Scott are finally going to fight tonight." The first thing John says, "Yeah, I'll see that to believe it." Like, "Oh, yeah." I said, "The Bulldog and Neidhart beat Disco and Alex Wright." He's like, "Oh, okay, what else?" Like, he just didn't care. I'm like, Jericho called out Goldberg, and then he beat up this midget that looked like Goldberg. Like, what? I'm like, it's what I even said. It's one of those things you gotta see. And Ernest Miller just beat Norman Smiley. As I was on the phone with him, Ernest Miller got the win. He's like, "What kind of show is this?" That's exactly what he said. I remember laughing my ass off as soon as he said that. What kind of show is this? If anybody knew John, the way he talked, when he expressed like disappointment or like he was annoyed or pissed off, it was so funny. Or when he'd say something like that, It was just hilarious. Like, he has such a way of expressing himself. It would crack all of us up. So, finally, we get to Rick and Scott. Nice video, pretty nice video package. I remember for this one. I'm like, well, no kidding. It's been how many months? So anyway, I said, "Oh, I gotta go. Rick and Scott are about to fight." I said, "I'll call you back a little later." So here it is. It's finally gonna happen, right? Rick versus Scott. It's finally gonna happen, right? Well, it kind of happened, and the crowd goes nuts when Rick is beating up on Scott. And so, okay, so this still has momentum. They've finally been waiting for this battle to actually happen for 7 goddamn months. Scott tried to bail a few times. Rick just threw him back in the ring. Buff gets involved and hurts his neck again. Buff had a bad history of neck problems that nearly ended his career. So, of course, they're playing up the drama of Buff's real injury. And the match continues, and Mark Curtis stops the match. The crowd's chanting bullshit. I'm with them on this because I am not buying this for a second. This goes on and on and on. They get Buff into the gurney. They put him into the ambulance, only for Buff and Scott to jump out and beat the shit out of Rick. I literally threw up my arms, got up off the couch, went to the washroom. That's all I can really do. I was honestly tempted to change the channel at this point. And I'm like, anything, you gotta be kidding me. Like, here's the thing. I can't complain too much because the pay-per-views I got for free. I can do that now. We had the what they call the black box, the ticker box, where you get pay-per-views for free. So I guess I can't complain too much. I obviously could change the channel, right? But I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Now, granted, I didn't know much about Fritz von Erich's heart attack angle that had happened years before this in World Class. A few months later, Ric Flair would fake a heart attack. The Shawn Michaels concussion thing at least was done in a somewhat tasteful way. But you know what? And mind you, that was before concussions. The awareness of what the effect that concussions had came to light in recent years. So it was long before that. So at the time, 1995, it wasn't so bad. The next up, Juventud Guerrera versus Silver King for the Cruiserweight Championship. And I like Hoovy. I didn't learn to appreciate Silver King until years later. I remember seeing Silver King on some episodes of Nitro and WCW Saturday Night. But I just I liked Hoovy, so you know I'm like, okay, I'll give this a chance. And I like cruiserweights. It's like I love the cruiserweights. I thought they were so much fun to watch. And you know what? I actually thought this match wasn't bad. I seen it again a couple of years ago. I'm like, you know what? This was fun. At least it got me back into the show again. So Hoovy, I thought was like he still is like heavily revered among hardcore fans as well as even younger wrestlers. A lot of the people I talk with at the Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy, check it out, folks. Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy. They look fondly on Hoovy and a lot of the WCW cruiserweights, and rightfully so. But I still think he's very underrated in terms of just how good he really was. So I never actually getting interested in this match. I barely saw much of Silver King. And so I'm like, okay, that was pretty good. So then Lee Marshall, I remember he talked to Conan about Scott Hall's drinking problem. I hated this angle. I'm like, oh, don't tell me this is next. Don't tell me this is next. But then next up was Raven and Saturn. Raven's rules. I was like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, here we go. I was actually finally just like, yes, like this is going to be freaking great. So the stipulation was a special added one. Canyon was handcuffed at ringside. Now Saturn finally gets his chance at Raven. They had a couple battles in the summer, but it didn't really solve anything. So the stipulation is if Saturn wins, the flock disbands. If Raven wins, Saturn's his slave for the rest of his career. Okay, so like this is a good story. They had a really good story going. They built up the tension between the two for several months. The video package was long, but it was good. So here we go. This was wild. I'm talking wild. This is exactly the kind of match I wanted to see on this pay-per-view. Just everything happening. Again, a plancha suicida is like shots into the guardrails. Just a good old-fashioned hardcore match. And the crowd was really into this. The Winston-Salem fans were always into shows. They were always a hot crowd. So that's not really a surprise. They were also, again, the other great build-up of this match is who do the Flock's allegiances lay with? I mean, some of them wanted to be away from Raven. Some of them wanted to stay, or did they? And that was the thing. It was a whole dissension thing. Like, who wants to stay? Who wants to go? Kind of deal. And who's going to turn on Raven? Who's going to turn on Saturn? Or who's going to... Again, it was that you didn't know. Kidman, surprisingly, because, again, people are thinking Kidman's going to side with Raven in the end here, because Kidman had been treated pretty badly. Kidman, who was a great talent in the Cruiserweight division, he turned it on him with a missile dropkick, and the crowd exploded. I am right into this, and I'm a Raven fan. I normally don't cheer against him, but this is how good this match really was, I thought. I always found myself on Saturn's side, because I was intrigued to see what Raven would do alone. And, well, spoiler, it wasn't that great. So as the members of the Flock that still stayed with Raven, they chased Kidman off. Saturn hits the patented Death Valley driver. The place just explodes with the biggest pop of the night. I'm not kidding. And they were chanting for Saturn. Saturn, Saturn, Saturn. And even I was getting really into Saturn at this point. I always liked Saturn, but like I'm really getting into him here. So despite the fact that he hit the Death Valley driver, it didn't end the match. Now, some would argue that the first DVD should be the finish, but again, the crowd would still remain right into it. But I still think that first Death Valley driver after Kidman's dropkick got the biggest pop. So Lodi got a Death Valley driver through the table. Raven hit the even flow, and the crowd got dead silent almost for a second. And 1, 2, no! And I'm like, oh my god! Like I'm hitting my head. And Saturn finally wins with another Death Valley driver. 1, 2, 3. The place just exploded. Match of the night. Match of the night. Great story. A lot of fun. Finally, the show is on track. I'm having such a great time. So next up, we have Kurt Hennig and Dean Malenko. Okay. I think this could be pretty good, too. These guys are really good wrestlers. And the match was fine. These two had a cage match on Nitro, I believe, not long before this. I hadn't seen it yet, but I'd heard about it. I wouldn't see it till a couple years later, and it was pretty good. But they had a disqualification finish. Yawn. So, this is a disqualification finish. It was a pretty good match from what it was. I mean, it's Malenko and Hennig. It's not going to be bad. But I remember it was just, again, it was one of those matches. I'm like, nothing really great happened here. Rick Rude interferes again. What did he freaking do? So at this point, after all that excitement of the Saturn Raven match, after seeing Hoovy, I'm just like, oh, come on. Next up was Scott Hall and Conan. Hall and Conan. I like Conan. I thought Conan was a great character. Hall was doing his whole drunk thing. He was taking drinks during the match. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is sad. I changed the channel. I changed it to the football game for a while. Because obviously there's always a Sunday night game. So I'm like, come on, this is sad. So I'm watching the game. I flip back to see if the match is finished. I don't want to give up on the whole pay-per-view. I still want to see the War Games match. But I turn it back just in time to see the replay of the Tequila Sunrise and Conan winning. Like, okay, whatever. I was honestly bored of this like halfway in. Like, yeah. All right, so here it finally was. The War Games. 2 rings. 1 big cage surrounding the ring. Teams of 3 each. 3 teams of 3. And there it is. The winner gets a #1 contendership. As usual, 5 minutes for the first period and then 2 minutes for each interval afterwards. Here we go. So I'm interested again. Reopen the bag of chips I sealed up because I thought I had enough. So the deal was that I guess the NWO was supposed to protect Hogan. And Brett didn't want to do that. Stevie Ray, on the other hand, will of course do that. Stevie Ray had just joined the NWO a month prior to this. So the random drawing, it's DDP and Bret Hart. Bret was the United States champion at this time. And I just remember thinking, it's sad how far he's fallen. I was going for Bret here. I want to see Bret and Goldberg. And Bret's my guy. Despite the fact that his WCW run had been lame up to this point, and pretty much would not get much better, I still wanted to see him face Goldberg. Bret had not main evented 1 single pay-per-view. He had like a match that was like almost semi-main with like Ric Flair at the sold out pay-per-view in January. But nothing. Goldberg and Sting then was announced for Nitro the next day. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to check that out for sure. But then, of course, in hindsight, you're thinking, why not put that on a pay-per-view? And put Conan in the War Games instead of Sting. I know, like, but again, I'm thinking, oh, Goldberg and Sting. Is this when Nitro was still trying to desperately win the Monday night ratings every week? Spoiler, and I'm going to get to this after I'm done here. They'd win tomorrow night after this. And I'll tell you why. Well, I mean, Goldberg's Sting was probably a good reason, but it wasn't the main one, brother, let me tell you. Okay, so DDP and Bret started. Starting off okay. The War Games match usually, what it does, the great concept of the War Games is it starts that way. It starts like slow. The heat builds pretty quick, and by the end, you're just right freaking into it. War Games is about revenge and settling grudges, and just again paying off some of the biggest rivalries you're seeing on television. And I thought about this too. I'm thinking, wait, if Steve's getting a title shot tomorrow, then what's the point of him being in this match? The winner gets a title shot. I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, like, oh, whatever. WCW. Or hey, why not put Goldberg and Jericho for the Nitro tomorrow? I don't know. I'm overthinking. Anyway, so Bret and DDP do their thing. They have a nice little match. Again, I thought their matches were pretty decent that they would have like after this and whatnot for the U.S. title. DDP goes for the Diamond Cutter, nothing. And then the next person that comes out, Stevie Ray. Clearly, with the reaction Stevie Ray got here, it's obvious who the Marty Jannetty of Harlem Heat was. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No disrespect to Stevie Ray, but we obviously know who the big single star was of that team. And I never liked Stevie Ray as a singles, even as a fan. I like Booker, but not Stevie. And I like the NWO. So the crowd boos when Stevie comes out. And then, of course, that should give the advantage to the NWO because both Bret and Stevie are on the NWO. But not really. So Sting is out next. Crowd goes nuts again. Surprisingly, with some of the crap on this show, the crowd did not die. I'll give them that. They are still into this. So Sting wakes up the crowd again. Winston-Salem is a very loyal WCW market. Sting goes nuts. House of Fire. And Roddy Piper comes up next as part of Team WCW. And okay, I should reiterate, Sting was with the Wolfpack. Sorry, Sting was with the Wolfpack. So now each faction has at least one guy in. NWO has two, sorry, God, I'm all over the place here. Piper is the second WCW guy in to come in because of Paige. Paige, Piper, and WCW. Stevie and Bret are NWO, even though Bret's not really fighting for the NWO. And I know it's a lot to keep up with. And Piper, Paige, yeah, I already said that. Sting, Wolfpack, yes. Sorry. Anyway, Piper goes nuts, as only Piper can. And he hits his own team member. Because again, technically it should be every man for themselves. I mean, despite this being a faction war, they're all fighting for a title shot, so at least it makes sense for team members to go after each other here. Hogan's going to want to watch his own back. Anyway, this isn't like other War Games matches. I'm noticing this really quick. I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is just whatever. Nothing's really happening here. I didn't change the channel this time. I still want to see who get the title shot. Yeah, Piper's doing his thing. And then Luger is next. Crowd pops for Luger. Luger goes nuts on Stevie Ray. Blah, 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 blah. Luger's part of the Wolfpack, I should say. Nothing really interesting happening. I can't remember for the life of me what's going on here until a little later, and I think I'm sure a lot of you know by now what I talk about. You know what? Let's just skip ahead. I'm sorry. I'm being really slow here. Nash comes out. Again, he gets a really good reaction. Because Nash was really, and despite what people want to say about Nash, spoiler, ending Goldberg's streak at Starrcade, Nash was red hot at the time. You can't dispute that. So Hogan jumps the gun. And slapjack time. That was the big NWO weapon of choice. Stevie Ray used to carry it a lot on him. Bret and Hogan start going after it. Stevie goes after Bret because Bret wouldn't want to protect Hogan, blah, 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 blah. And of course, like I said, Hogan's trying to find a shortcut, which again, from a story standpoint, makes sense. Obviously, that's what Hogan does in this as a Hollywood Hogan role. Goes on and on and on and on. And the final member of Team WCW is about to come in as the ring fills up with smoke. And here comes the Warrior. Hogan grabs him, but then there's another blast of smoke. The Warrior's gone. How did he disappear, you ask? The trap door. There's rumors that Warrior was Renegade. I don't know. Again, they can't confirm or deny. Again, apparently that was Renegade. So Hogan is just left holding the Warrior's coat. And here comes the Warrior. For real, our Warrior still got a really good reaction here when he came out. And then Stevie Ray gets offense on him, which I thought was kind of strange. Anyways, so nothing's really, like, again, this is a mess now. The match itself does not have the atmosphere of a typical War Games match. They might as well just have like Gauntlet or something with guys fighting for a title shot or whatever. And then Hogan escapes, locks the cage. Warrior tries to boot his way out of the cage and chases Hogan to the back. It got a great reaction. And then despite everything, yeah, so everybody was laid out. DDP hits the diamond cutter on Stevie Ray and pins him. Wow, that was a very anticlimactic ending. Like, okay, DDP Goldberg, that'll be pretty good. Around this time, my parents came in. I get up, get ready to brush my teeth, and I get ready for bed. And my dad would usually ask me, because my dad was not a wrestling fan anymore at this point, but he would still ask me, hey, how was the pay per view? Said, just shrug my shoulders. I remember going to bed that night thinking that was the worst WCW pay per view I've ever watched. In hindsight, that probably changed. I mean, I have seen Bash 91 by now, and there have been a couple others, but this one still ranks pretty high. That War Games match was definitely the worst War Games match. I still maintain that to this day. That is the worst fucking War Games match ever. And I really can't fault the talent there. You have 9 guys in that ring. Pretty much bona fide Hall of Fame caliber. Yes, even Stevie, because again, he was part of Harlem Heat. They were a great tag team. So I'm not going to take shots at him there. He was a great tag team wrestler, so therefore, Hall of Famer. So you had 9 legends in that ring. Guys who have put asses in seats, gotten people to watch them on pay-per-view by the hundreds of thousands. But really, and even though the crowd was still going nuts for the Warrior Hogan stuff, which I think they enjoyed it, more power to them. Thing is, as kind of at this point, the whole Hogan Warrior thing was kind of eye rolling before it got really bad. So it was kind of like, it's not that great, but it wasn't terrible yet. So yes, the Warrior, the fake Warrior, came up to the trapdoor that the Bulldog injured himself in, and pretty much not ending his career, but might as well have. And DDP's a number 1 contender. I like DDP, so I'm like, okay, DDP Goldberg will be pretty cool. But I want to see Bret and Goldberg. I don't know. Anyway, I was interested to watch Nitro that week. Nitro was still airing Wednesdays on TSN. I remember, yeah. Okay, so just before I went to bed, John called me again. My parents were a little like, John should be calling that late. And I'm like, dude, you don't call after a certain time. He's like, oh, sorry. He's like, I thought your parents were at a movie. Like, well, they were, but they're back now. I can talk to you for about 2 minutes. So I told him what happened. And he's like, oh, we're staying tomorrow? Cool. Like, obviously, we'd have to wait till Wednesday. But I told him about the pay-per-view at school. And all I could talk about at school the next day with my friends, with John and Jeff, was Raven and Saturn. That was the match I talked about. And I'm like, oh, yeah, DDP won the War Games. That's literally all I said. Like, DDP won the War Games. And that was it. And I talked about Jericho's segment a bit. And, yeah. So that was Fall Brawl 98. Here I am watching this crappy WCW pay-per-view. So upset that I'm not going to be able to watch my hometown pay-per-view, WWF Breakdown, which is 2 weeks from this show. Watched Nitro that Wednesday. There were the rumors that Ric Flair was coming back. And let me tell you this. I didn't learn to appreciate Flair 110% until years later. But I gotta say this. I knew how good he was. I knew he was a legend for a reason, and I knew he had earned his reputation. Even at the age of 15, I knew that. So I'm like, okay, you know what? He's still a big deal. And Flair always came off as a big deal. That's why I never once really changed the channel when he was on. So they do this great segment with the Horsemen, with Arn Anderson cutting a promo, reuniting the Horsemen again. Arn, of course, was retired at this point, but still, obviously, he's always going to be associated with the Horsemen no matter what. The promo is about to end. You know, he does Arn. Oh, he does it so well. That's why Arn is a master of the microphone. You know, he says, I've been hitting the head so many times, I got Alzheimer's or something along those lines. He's like, I almost forgot the 4th Horseman. Ric Flair in the place just freaking loses it. It was one of the biggest pops I ever heard. Flair can't even coming to the entranceway, can't hold back his emotions. He's got tears in his eyes because the weight is being lifted off his shoulders. Bischoff, who earlier in the night was thrown up on by Scott Hall, yeah, I'm not making that up, and I'm not going into that any further, comes out, says Flair, your history. Yeah, Flair just cuts a scathing, angry promo on him. Abuse of power, you son of a bitch. Like, oh, it was such good stuff. And I became like, I was already kind of like Flair at times, like, but I was never again, I didn't truly learn to appreciate what he was until a few years after this. But I'm right into Flair here. I'm like, you freaking knock him out. And I like the NWO too, but at this point with Bischoff, I just want to see Bischoff get his ass kicked. I'm like, freaking get him, Rick. And it made me excited to see Flair getting his hands on Bischoff, like I want to see Austin get his hands on McMahon in a match at this point. There you go. That was Fall Brawl 98. Oh, was it ever. That's about to do it for this episode. And next week, I'm going to continue this era. As I said, this is almost like a two-parter. Going to be talking about WWF Breakdown, 1998. From right here, the very city I am living in and doing this podcast from, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. What would happen? You'll find out in next week's podcast. Until then, thank you all for listening. I appreciate all of you that are listening, by the way. The numbers for my podcast have gone up dramatically in the last few weeks. Thank you so much, especially the Hulk Hogan Shawn Michaels episode has done really well. Has become my second most streamed episode behind my first one. And it's about to actually pass it. So again, thank you all for that. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever you're streaming your podcast. Keep on listening, please. I appreciate your support. Follow me on social media, BillChase33 on both Twitter and Instagram. You can add me to Facebook, Bill Chase. I'll gladly talk wrestling with you. I love talking wrestling, old wrestling, classic stuff, new stuff even, independence. I will gladly talk to you about anything. I always love a spirited wrestling conversation. So yes, next week, WWF Breakdown 1998. So until then, this is your friend and mine, Bill Chase, quoting my fellow native Hamiltonian, late great Billy Red Lyons, when I tell you, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just remember in the battle of good versus evil, evil will always triumph because good is dumb.